What would it feel like to know that your entire existence is the result of a promise that defied the laws of biology and the relentless march of time? Imagine being the young man walking beside your father toward the summit of a mountain, carrying the heavy wood for a sacrifice, only to realize that you are the offering the fire demands. This is the story of Isaac, the patriarch born from the laughter of an elderly mother and whose faith was tested on the most difficult altar a human being has ever had to face. Often, Isaac is overshadowed in the biblical narrative, seen merely as a quiet bridge between the giant faith of Abraham and the cunning ambition of Jacob. However, his life is one of the most profound chronicles of obedience, meekness, and unwavering faithfulness recorded in the Holy Scriptures. From his miraculous birth that broke the silence of a century to the heartbreaking drama of a blessing stolen by his own son, Isaac's journey teaches us that true strength is not always found in the heat of battle. Instead, it is found in the quiet capacity to wait on the promises of God, even when physical sight fails and the path ahead seems shrouded in uncertainty. Today, here at Bible Says It, we are going to immerse ourselves in the life of this fundamental man. We won't just explore the historical milestones, we will seek to feel the chilling tension of that knife raised on Mount Moriah and the overwhelming emotion of a love that crossed vast deserts to find comfort. I invite you to subscribe right now and hit the like button on this video. Your support is what allows these sacred chronicles to reach thousands of souls searching for hope and truth. Get ready, because we are about to reveal why Isaac is so much more than a promised son. He is the living testimony that God always provides. Let's begin. The story of Isaac does not begin in a cradle, but with a promise that seemed to defy the most elementary laws of nature. Abraham and Sarah were wanderers in a foreign land, carrying with them a word from God that, year after year, seemed to fade into the desert dust. When the promise was first delivered, Abraham was 75 years old. However, time marched on inexorably without the long-awaited heir arriving. As the decades passed, what was initially a dream of faith became, in the eyes of the world, an absolute biological impossibility. Imagine the tension of that wait, which stretched for 25 long years. Abraham had already reached 100 years of age, and Sarah, his lifelong companion, was 90. Their bodies reflected the wear and tear of centuries, and human hope had long since been extinguished. It was in this state of total vulnerability and silence that the Creator decided to manifest His power. The Bible tells us that when the announcement was made that Sarah would conceive a son in her advanced age, she could not help but laugh from inside her tent. It was a laugh born of skepticism, of wonder, and perhaps from the scars of a lifetime of barrenness. However, God's faithfulness does not depend on human logic or physical capability. The birth of Isaac was a miracle that shattered the silence of old age and fulfilled the divine promise to give Abraham a lineage as numerous as the stars. The child's very name, Isaac, which means laughter, was etched as an eternal testimony that God has the final word over what is possible. His arrival did not just bring comfort to an elderly couple, it marked the official beginning of the covenant lineage. Isaac was the child of promise, the living proof that when God speaks, nature itself must step aside for His will. His life began under the sign of awe, setting the stage for one of the greatest tests of obedience ever recorded. Abraham's faith had been forged in the furnace of decades of waiting, but nothing in his long life could have prepared him for the instruction he received in the dead of a night that would forever change the spiritual history of humanity. The divine command was clear, direct, and humanly devastating: "Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering." This was not just about surrendering the life of a young man, it was, in essence, surrendering the very promise for which Abraham had spent his life walking through the desert. Yet, the scripture records no protest from the patriarch. Instead, we see immediate, silent obedience. At the break of dawn, Abraham saddled his donkey, split the wood for the fire, and began the journey alongside Isaac and two of his servants. For 3 days, they traveled under an unforgiving sun. The silence between father and son must have been dense, heavy with a tension that only faith could sustain. Isaac, no longer a small child but a strong young man capable of carrying the heavy wood for the sacrifice up the steep slopes, walked trustingly by his father's side. Upon reaching the base of Mount Moriah, Abraham left the servants behind with a phrase that revealed his absolute conviction in God's power to either provide or resurrect. "I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you." As they ascended the final stretch, Isaac, noticing they had the fire and the knife but lacked the essential element, broke the silence with a question that still echoes with heart-wrenching depth. "My father, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham's response was a prophetic declaration that would span millennia. "My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering." When they reached the summit, Abraham built the altar and arranged the wood with hands that may have trembled but did not falter. In that climactic moment, something astounding occurred. Isaac, in the prime of his strength, allowed himself to be bound and placed upon the altar. He yielded his will to that of his father and his God. Just as Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son, the angel of the Lord called out from heaven, stopping the blade and confirming that the ultimate test of faith had been passed with unshakable integrity. At the precise instant when the cold steel was about to fulfill its devastating purpose, a voice from the highest heavens tore through the heavy, expectant air of Mount Moriah. The angel of the Lord called out to Abraham with divine urgency, stopping his arm mid-air. "Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him," was the command that brought an eternal sigh of relief to the mountaintop. In that second of absolute silence, it was proven beyond any shadow of doubt that the patriarch loved his Creator above his greatest earthly treasure, his own son. Isaac, lying bound upon the altar, was a first-hand witness to how radical obedience and total surrender can unleash the direct, life-saving intervention of the Almighty. As Abraham lifted his eyes, he saw a ram caught by its horns in a nearby thicket. This was no mere coincidence or stroke of luck, it was the tangible, physical answer to the faith that both father and son had professed during their agonizing 3-day journey. With hands that now trembled with overwhelming gratitude, Abraham untied his son and took the ram, offering it as a burnt offering in the stead of Isaac. This act of substitution was far more than just a rescue. It was a profound prophetic shadow of a future day on a nearby hill, where God himself would provide his own son as the ultimate lamb to take away the sins of the world. To immortalize this sacred encounter, Abraham named that place Jehovah-Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. This name became a pillar of hope for all future generations, a reminder that God never arrives late and that his provision often manifests at the very peak of our trials. In response to this unwavering faithfulness, the voice of God resonated once more, but this time not with a test, but with a glorious, multi-generational confirmation of the covenant. The Lord swore by himself to bless Isaac and multiply his descendants exceedingly, comparing their number to the vastness of the stars in the night sky and the countless grains of sand upon the seashore. Isaac descended from that mountain transformed. He was no longer just the son of a promise, but the living bearer of a divine heritage sealed by the miraculous provision of God. As the years advanced, Abraham, now well stricken in age and blessed by the Lord in all things, realized that his earthly mission would not be complete until the future of the sacred lineage was secured. His greatest concern was not merely finding a wife for Isaac, but ensuring that his son did not take a wife from among the daughters of the Canaanites, whose pagan practices could jeopardize the spiritual integrity of the covenant. To address this, Abraham called his most trusted and eldest servant, likely Eliezer, and placed him under a solemn oath. He was to travel back to Abraham's own kindred in Mesopotamia to find the woman God had chosen for his son. The servant embarked on a journey of hundreds of miles, leading a caravan of 10 camels laden with precious gifts and treasures from his master's house. Upon arriving at the city of Nahor, he stopped by a well outside the gates at the hour when the women came out to draw water. Here, the servant demonstrated a faith as profound as his master's. He did not look for a bride based on mere outward beauty or wealth. Instead, he offered a specific and humble prayer, asking for a sign of character and hospitality. He prayed that the maiden who would not only give him a drink but also volunteer to water his 10 camels would be the one appointed by God for Isaac. Before he had even finished speaking in his heart, Rebekah appeared, a young woman of remarkable beauty and purity. With a spirit of extraordinary diligence and kindness, she not only quenched the servant's thirst but tirelessly drew water until all 10 camels had finished drinking, a task that required immense physical effort. Stunned by this clear divine confirmation, the servant bestowed upon her a golden earring and 2 bracelets, bowing his head to worship the God of Abraham for leading him straight to his master's kinsman. After being welcomed into the home of Bethuel and Laban, Rebekah's father and brother, the servant recounted the miraculous events at the well. Recognizing the hand of the Almighty, the family acknowledged that the thing proceedeth from the Lord. Rebekah, in a moment of courageous faith, agreed to leave her family and her past behind immediately to marry a man she had never seen, trusting entirely in the divine plan. This was not a mere human arrangement, it was a union orchestrated in the courts of heaven to preserve the light of the promise for generations to come. The narrative now leads us to a moment of profound stillness and transition. Isaac, faithful to his reflective and peaceful nature, was found in the fields near Bir Lahai-roi as evening fell. He did not seek the acclaim of crowds. Instead, he sought a space for meditation under the open sky, a place where his spirit could connect with the God of his father. In his heart, the weight of mourning for his mother, Sarah, still lingered, a lingering emotional void that served as a constant reminder of life's fragility, even for those walking under the shadow of the promise. It was at this moment of deep introspection that, as he lifted his eyes toward the horizon gilded by the sunset, he spotted a silhouette that would change his destiny forever, a caravan of camels returning from the desert. From a distance, Rebekah also observed with curiosity the man who was walking alone through the field to meet them. Upon asking the servant about the identity of the stranger and receiving the answer that he was his master, Isaac, she performed a gesture of deep reverence and modesty, alighting from her camel and covering herself with a veil. This encounter required no thunderous words to be transcendental. The servant enthusiastically recounted every detail of the journey to Isaac, the fervent prayer at the well, the divine providence manifested through the water, and the courage of the young woman who agreed to leave everything behind for a future she knew only by faith. The final act of this union is one of the most moving and significant in the Bible. Isaac took Rebekah by the hand and brought her into the tent that had belonged to his mother, Sarah. This symbolic gesture represented much more than a change of residence. It was the official recognition of Rebekah as the new matriarch of the covenant and the heir to the faith of previous generations. The scripture tells us in a simple yet powerful way that Isaac loved her deeply, and in that love, he finally found the comfort he so desperately needed after his mother's death. Here we see a divine pattern. God does not only oversee great national destinies, He also tenderly cares for wounded hearts, providing companionship and affection at the exact moment of our greatest need. Despite the deep love and comfort Rebekah brought into Isaac's life, the marriage soon faced a challenge that seemed to be a recurring test in the lineage of the promise: barrenness. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, and for 2 decades, the laughter of children was not heard within their tents. However, unlike the previous generation, we do not see human attempts to force destiny here. We see an Isaac who, true to his character, turned directly to the source of all miracles. He entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord, in his infinite sovereignty, granted his plea. Rebekah's pregnancy, however, became a battlefield before the children ever saw the light of day. She felt the children struggling violently within her womb, a struggle so intense that it led her to consult God directly about the meaning of this internal conflict. The divine response was a prophetic revelation that would set the course of biblical history. 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. When the days for her delivery were fulfilled, the first came out red and hairy all over like a garment, and they named him Esau. Immediately after, his brother was born, his hand taking hold of Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob, which means the supplanter or he who grasps the heel. Isaac was 60 years old when he finally embraced his 2 sons. Nevertheless, as they grew, the differences between them became vast. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field who enjoyed his father's favoritism because of Isaac's taste for wild game. Meanwhile, Jacob was a quiet man who preferred staying among the tents and held a special place in Rebekah's heart. This division of affection would sow the seeds of a family drama that would put the peace of Isaac's household to the ultimate test. The years did not pass in vain for the son of promise. Old age eventually reached Isaac, dimming his eyes until he was submerged in near total blindness, a physical veil that foreshadowed the family and spiritual crisis about to unfold. Feeling that his days were drawing to a close, Isaac called his favorite son, Esau, with a request that mingled fatherly affection with sacred tradition. He was to hunt game and prepare that savory meat his father loved, so that after eating, Isaac could bestow the solemn blessing of the birthright before he died. What Isaac saw was a private moment of legacy, but his words did not fall on solitary ears. Rebekah, ever attentive to the movements within the tent, overheard the plan and acted with a cunning driven by the memory of the divine prophecy that favored the younger son. In a conspiracy woven with threads of deception and desperation, she convinced Jacob to supplant his brother. The tension in the household reached its peak as Jacob, fearing he might bring a curse upon himself instead of a blessing, was covered by his mother with the skins of young goats to simulate Esau's hairiness and dressed in his brother's clothes to carry the scent of the open fields. When Jacob entered his father's tent with the prepared dish, the atmosphere grew thick with suspicion. Isaac, though deprived of sight, kept his other senses alert. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau, he murmured with a confusion that still haunts readers of the Bible today. However, the tactile deception and the aroma of the fields overcame his doubts. After eating and drinking, Isaac prepared to pronounce the irrevocable words of the covenant. He blessed Jacob with the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth, and an abundance of grain and wine. He granted him lordship over his brethren and decreed that nations would bow down to him, sealing a destiny that Jacob had seized through guile. No sooner had Jacob left his father's presence than Esau returned from the hunt. The moment of discovery was devastating. Upon learning of the supplantation, Isaac trembled with an exceedingly great trembling, realizing that the blessing, once released, could not be taken back. Esau's cry, a bitter, heart-wrenching wail pleading for a blessing for himself as well, marked an eternal fracture in the family. Isaac, caught between his love for Esau and the inerrancy of his own inspired word, could only confirm that Jacob would indeed be blessed. This episode serves as a powerful reminder that while God's purposes are always fulfilled, human actions marked by deceit leave scars that endure for generations. Following the family storm caused by Jacob's deception, Isaac's life offers us a masterclass in perseverance and peaceful character. A new famine struck the land, similar to the one his father Abraham had faced decades earlier. Although human instinct suggested fleeing to Egypt for relief, the Lord appeared to him with a clear instruction: "Dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of." Isaac obeyed and settled in Gerar, where he experienced supernatural blessing. The Bible records that he sowed in that land of scarcity and reaped 100-fold that same year, for the Lord blessed him. His wealth grew so great in flocks and servants that it stirred deep envy among the Philistines. In an act of silent but destructive hostility, the Philistines stopped up all the wells that Abraham's servants had dug, filling them with earth. In the desert, a well was not just a source of water, it was the difference between life and death. Instead of responding with the violence his large household could have mustered, Isaac demonstrated extraordinary meekness. He moved away from the conflict zone and began to reopen his father's wells, restoring their original names. The struggle continued in the valley. His servants dug and found a well of springing water, but the herdsmen of Gerar fought over it. Isaac, without losing his peace, named the well Ezek, contention, and moved on. They dug a second well, and they fought over that one too. He named it Sitnah, enmity, and moved away again. Finally, he dug a third well for which they did not strive, and he named it Rehoboth, saying, "For now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." His ability to yield instead of fight led even his enemies, King Abimelech and his generals, to seek a peace treaty with him, recognizing that the hand of God was clearly upon his life. Isaac did not conquer with the sword, but with the patience of one who knows that the owner of the earth will always provide a place of rest. The life of Isaac, which began with a miraculous laugh and was tested in the fire of Mount Moriah, reached its sunset with the same serenity that characterized his mature years. Unlike his father Abraham, who was a pioneer of distant lands, or his son Jacob, whose life was marked by struggle and flight, Isaac was the patriarch who remained. His strength did not lie in external conquest, but in internal resilience. He was the unbreakable link that held the chain of the divine covenant, proving that faithfulness is often manifested in consistency and the ability to dig wells of peace where others sow conflict. In his final days, Isaac lived long enough to see God's purpose triumph over human weaknesses. He had the satisfaction of seeing Jacob return after his long years in Padan Aram, and most movingly, he witnessed a reconciliation between his two sons, Esau and Jacob. The hatred that once threatened to destroy his lineage dissolved into an embrace, allowing the elderly patriarch to depart in peace. At the age of 180, the Bible records that Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days. He was buried by his two sons in the cave of Machpelah, the same place where his parents rested, closing a fundamental chapter of sacred history. Isaac's legacy transcends the centuries. God identifies himself throughout Scripture as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, elevating his name to a status of eternal honor. He taught us that being the child of promise requires absolute surrender, a patience that can wait 20 years for a child, and a meekness that prefers to give up a well rather than lose the blessing. If the story of this man of faith has resonated with your heart, we invite you to join our community here at A Bible Says It. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave us a comment about which part of Isaac's life inspired you the most today. Your like helps us continue bringing the depth of the Scriptures to the entire world. May the peace of the God of Isaac be with you always, and we'll see you in the next video.